Can we get the slides on?
Okay, so sorry, you're going to get a lot of me, so I promise this is the last time. The corporate innovation startup engagement. And I'll give you my perspective as both a startup person and corporate person as an investor as well, too. So don't need to talk about, you know who I am, also know who we are. And so why is everyone super interested right now in corporate innovation and startup engagement, right? So if you look at this number, you think about the lifespan of corporates in the S&P 500 is actually declining very, very, very quickly. And I think the big reason for that, if you look at all the trends I mentioned earlier, they're having a hard time keeping up because they're big, dumb, and stupid, right? That's a reality. That's a reality. But this has also led to this huge, fast-growing industry of the corporate startup industry. And this is actually a great book, by the way. I do recommend it. It's hard to follow, but it's actually a great book. And this has actually become a huge, hundreds of million-dollar business and probably will continue for a while. But how's it working? It's actually, I don't think it's working very well. There's a lot of like innovation theater. And so I liken it to this train, right? Everyone's kind of playing on top of this train that's probably going to collapse. So as you can probably figure out, the rest of this presentation is probably not super positive on this direction, but I hope somebody's going to figure it out. And so Steve Blank, he's actually one of the startup gods in Silicon Valley. He's written several books, teaches at Stanford. He said, I'm going to read this quote, "In the last few years, we've recognized that a startup is not a smaller version of a large company. We're now learning that companies are not a larger version of startups, right? Because they're very, very different beasts." And if you think about what a startup is, ultimately, there's a lot of good things and bad things with a startup, right? The good thing is they can move very, very quickly, super, super focused, and very, very customer focused in general. But it is a temporary organization. And also remember, most startups die, right? Like 80 to 90% of startups die in the first 1 to 2 years. So it's a very, very high risk and high sort of like payoff game, which is unfortunately not something that a lot of corporates are sort of well set up for, at least that type of mindset and structure. And so here's a couple reasons for this, right? The different pace. You want to guess which one's the corporate and which one's the startup. I'm not going to, this should be very, very obvious, right? They operate on very, very different paces because if you think about what fast is for a startup, fast is basically get it done the same day, get it done the same hour, because if you don't do it, you're dead. If you're a big company, we can wait till next week, or you have to get a lot of buy-in from different folks, right? So there's a pacing issue. This is actually why the engagement has not been great. Second reason, legacy business models, right? You usually have shareholders, you usually have investors, and so your job when you're hired at a big corporation is to focus on the core business and defend the core business and the revenue stream. Unfortunately, if that revenue stream is actually dying, you know, because of the incentives, right, and this leads to this, right? Wrong people, wrong mindsets, right? So most of the folks who work in corporates are probably working corporates because they don't want to do startups. It's a very specific skill set and just different. You just think very, very different. And last of all, leadership incentives, right? Especially if you're a publicly traded company, you know, a lot of times for innovation, you have to invest in these things for years. And I mean years, right? And think about this. If you are actually in a publicly traded company, you put money into an accelerator, into a VC fund, and you put it in for like about a year, or whatever the innovation initiative that you actually have. But then what happens? You have a bad quarter. Or all of a sudden you have a new CEO. They come in, they change stuff. All the innovation people are fired. Start from scratch, go back to basics, right? And so the leadership incentives actually in most corporates are not actually in place to drive long-term innovation, which is my opinion. But there might be hope. I don't know, maybe.
I think there is. And I'd like to actually invite, after hearing some critical opinion about it, Anton on stage, who is representing Pioneers Discover, a player that is doing a very decent job in this space. Can you tell your view about CSE?
Sure. So I can tell you it's not as bad, probably. We have done already a pretty good job in that space. And for the ones who don't know us so far, Pioneers Discover is basically one part of Pioneers. Pioneers is helping startups to grow. We established a platform in Vienna where we started with an event for startups, helping them to find relevant investors, relevant corporate partners. And through this, actually, we found out that a lot of startups in this space are seeking also for corporate partners who help them to grow, because there are a lot of synergies that we found out in this space, which we wanted to utilize on. And For the ones who expected Oliver, because he was on the agenda, I guess, my name is Anton. We were heading back from Silicon Valley last week. Oliver unfortunately missed the flight, so his flight was canceled. So I returned a day earlier, that's why I'm here. And I'm heading Pioneers Discover in our space. Do we have a clicker?
Oh yeah, here.
That's awesome, perfect. So, as you probably already heard, we wanted to help tech visionaries to grow. So we wanted to have a network of tech innovators that have the opportunity to succeed, especially in Europe. And we started with very small-scale events, called them Start Vienna, Start Europe, heading up to Pioneers Festival, which was already done 7 years ago, the first time. And through this, we got a very big network in our space to help startups to emerge. And this was basically an intrinsic motivation of our founders, because they were also confronted with a corporate world that was not that fascinating to them. So they came from University of Economics. There was the chance to start in consulting business with McKinsey, BCG & Co. There was the chance to also start within the corporate hemisphere, but none of these opportunities were really attractive to them. So they were also actually trying to build their own startup. And this was pretty tough for them some 8 years ago, or 10 years ago meanwhile. That's why they thought, okay, there is definitely a window of opportunity to help people that want to build their own startups in Europe. And this is how Pioneers basically started. You see here some pictures. This was basically 2009 with 40 people there. One of these people that have attended this event was, for example, the founder of Runtastic. You probably know this running app that has been actually exited to Adidas some years ago. And 3 years later, we went into the Vienna Imperial Palace, into the Hofburg, and built up Pioneers Festival with around 3,000 participants. And the good thing is, this went pretty well, and that's why we also went into this field of working together with corporates more and more intensive. And we saw this slide already before. The reason why corporates came to our events, because they also know that especially they have a pretty tough job at the moment to stay attractive on the market, to stay a competitive player on the market, and this average lifespan is continuously declining. Why does it happen like that? We know that sometimes it's a matter of success. A lot of companies, a lot of corporates out there are pretty successful in what they are doing, and they sometimes overlook what is happening on the market, and that's why they sometimes also fail to innovate. There is an organization, we also heard that from Marvin before, which is probably not the right framework for innovation. We have a lot of things going on in corporates which are not basically the best incubation lab that you can feel. Who of you knows this person? Or probably this product? Kodak, exactly, yeah. That's the first digital camera that was invented, and this was within the corporate called Kodak. And the thing that this guy got as feedback from their management, yeah, that's nice, but probably don't tell anyone, because we have quite a sustainable, good-looking business model with films, and digital cameras will basically replace films. So please keep this idea with you. We know what happened to Kodak, and there are a lot of other stories where we know as well that they kind of failed to innovate, and that's why we also started, especially working with corporates, on identifying innovation opportunities. And we call it kind of the true economy, so it's basically a combination of old economy corporates that have a lot of experience in their field. They know very well how their market is looking. They know very well how things are working out in their field. And there is also a new economy, basically startups, which have innovative ideas in this space and help them to also become more innovative on their space. So there are definitely lots of synergies that we see, especially when it comes to innovative ideas, talent, technologies that are changing quite fast. The startups have a pretty good insight into this field and can help corporates. On the other hand, there's a lot of market access, there's a lot of networks that already exist, which startups can access through corporates. This is us. We are pioneers. We do still events. We do help corporates in consulting business. We also invest into startups with a pre-seed fund, and we build a digital product where we have around 15,000 startups in our database and helping them to identify the right partners in their space.
Thanks for sharing. Mary, you are leading one of the best corporate startup engagement program in Budapest called MKB FinTech Lab. Can you tell about the first years of experiences and the first results?
Sure, yeah, thanks. I guess I'm the only one coming from the deep, dark corporate side here. But yeah, I don't have slides, but just a quick background about MKB FinTech Labs. So we were started 2 years ago by MKB Bank to be a fintech innovation lab and startup accelerator program. We have 3 pillars of activities: community, accelerator, and partnerships. With the community, we realized, fintech is, it's become more of a buzzword, but I think we do our part to invest into the community and knowledge sharing and development in that space. So we do meetups and events with the sexiest fintech startups like TransferWise and Revolut. We also have a fintech academy that we run every year to educate the community about different fintech topics and skills needed to run fintech startups. The accelerator, the second pillar, is sort of the heart of our program, our activities. We run a 12-week program every spring. We're recruiting now for our 3rd batch, so if you know any sexy, cool fintech startups from the region, so we're active outside of Hungary as well, please send them our way. And then the last one is partnerships, and I think this is the most important and pertinent. I mean, this is why MKB started this initiative in the first place, to really bring in value and co-create with the startups. And yeah, it hasn't been easy, I'll be honest. It never is. But I think, to kind of touch back on what Marvin was saying, and and this is actually something, we talked about with Mike Siegel, one of your colleagues at 500 Startups, that we need empathy from both sides. So the startups need empathy with the corporates, and the corporates need to have empathy with the startups. Otherwise, there's no way these 2 mindsets will be able to come together. And I have to say, even though there's still pretty traditional processes in place at MKB Bank in terms of procurement and compliance, and you have to go through all these hurdles, there really is this empathy from the highest levels. Even the CEO of the bank, he came out and spoke at our demo day and was saying, we have to be patient with each other because we're trying, and we hope that, okay, yeah, maybe it takes 6 months to get a contract still, but that's faster than 1 year, right? We're making some progress. So I would say, yeah, it's, we've had some bumps and hurdles, but we're overall really positive, actually, about the success and results we've had so far.
So, question to all of you, but maybe first to Marvin. What are the best examples that we see in the space? What are the most successful companies doing corporate innovation, engagement programs, startups?
Not that many of them, to be honest. I mean, I just don't see that many of them. And so I'll give you an example, like Live, that we're working with them, right? So full disclosure, we're working with like General Motors, right? And that's public. So they work with us in the accelerator. We've been working with them now for the last 1.5 years or 2. So as part of it is, it's a sponsorship, but they work with us to source companies that could be potentially interesting for them later on. And I'll be very, very honest, that first time we worked with them, like there were probably 2 or 3 times I was close to pulling the trigger and just ending it, because it was just, there's a learning process, I think, on both sides. And it actually worked out fine, and I would give General Motors actually a lot of credit for sticking with it. And so this is an initiative driven by the CTO. And they came in, and the reality is that they were learning how to work with startups because it's taking a long time. They didn't necessarily give the best advice, and actually sucking up a lot of the time from my startups and from my team. And like that was the frustration, I think, from our side. Just like, this is just, what are you doing? You don't even know what you're doing, right? And then from their side, they were also learning how to sort of like move a little bit faster, procurement is a huge issue, legal is a huge issue, so trying to figure out like ways to sort of get past that. And what has ended up happening now, we've run 3 programs with them, and it's been great because our startup founders, generally speaking, are fairly happy because 2 out of the 3 that come through every single program, end up getting paid proof of concepts, which is great, right? So GM gets sort of new technology, and the startups get a customer that actually pays. Which is awesome. And so I would say to give them credit, we're doing stuff that was recently announced with Sberbank, so super excited with them. Sberbank out of Russia now, so we're going to run a program for them. And the reality is that I think like they're coming into this with the right mindset. It is going to be very hard, and I'm not expecting it to be easy because we have to learn how to work together on both sides. But I think it is starting to happen. I just think it's really, really hard, and it needs to be happening at this has to happen. These type of initiatives need to be pushed at like the CEO level and the board level, or else it will not survive.
Anton, can you maybe highlight one of your projects that you consider that had results and hands-on tangible things?
I mean, I definitely agree with Marvin that there is a lot of things that need to be settled first in a corporate, and this is what we see a lot. There is legal, there is procurement, there is IT. These guys sometimes make our lives pretty difficult to also collaborate with startups. But as soon as you kind of have, first of all, top-down commitment that this whole thing should happen, and these kind of struggles that are within corporate facilities are kind of settled, then there is basically a good foundation to start with. And this is what we see, for example, with our clients as well. Currently this week, for example, we had with Airbus, we're consulting their acceleration program, BizLab, and we help them to identify top-notch startups that help aviation business, basically. And we see a lot of good examples where we really find startups that help them, and they also start collaborating with each other. For one example is, you probably know Bose noise-canceling headphones. So this technology that Bose invented for their headphones, there are startups out there which can do this also for kind of open space, so not necessarily in a headphone. We're now talking with Airbus and the startup how to integrate these noise-canceling stuff into their seats. So basically you sit in a plane and you don't have all these noise around you without wearing headphones. So there are definitely very good examples. I just come back from a bootcamp with Wien Energie, so one of the biggest energy providers in Austria. There are a lot of energy startups that have very good interactive solutions with clients where Wien Energie struggles a lot. Still, they are one of the biggest providers in this space. So the collaboration with these guys pretty much makes sense, yeah.
Gotcha. Mary, I know that a few successful startups that came out FinTech Lab already starting pilot projects with MKB. Can you share any details about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of respond a little, I think, talking about a successful program, it depends on how we define that, right? So I think expecting immediate business results or value creation is maybe a little bit ambitious, but we like to define it in terms of, cost savings to the bank. So one of our, kind of flagship or highlight stories that we say is one of our startups from our first batch actually built the API platform for MKB Bank, and they had an offer from a big player to do it for 5 times the price, and our startup was able to do it for a lot cheaper and probably a lot better, a lot more of a custom. So we can kind of document that cost savings right off the bat. So that was one of our big success stories so far. And I think the other thing that we're trying to do is getting away from this having this business model, business value burden right from the upfront. And Eric Ries talks about innovation accounting, right? So are there other ways that we can define success in terms of sharing this mindset and about learning? The bank is interested in doing some innovative new types of products. And the way that they should do that is this kind of customer-focused approach and looking at learning as an outcome. And so we're actually, we started a pilot program where we do basically, what I thought would be a simple email campaign. Okay, it took a while to actually get this set up at the bank, but now we have a pipeline where we can promote our startups to bank customers, get them to try it out, get some real feedback from actual bank customers, and the bank can then use that feedback to validate those companies, decide if they want to do something further with them, or use that to build out something new and different on their own side. So I'd say, yeah, our main success has been in terms of cost savings, and then also implementing some learning, some structure around learning at the bank.
Gotcha. So the spectrum is pretty wide. If you talk about corporate startup engagements, you can start hackathons, open innovation programs, sponsor co-working spaces. By the way, that's a great idea if you want to talk about that.
Are you building a?
We are having a co-working space. Yes. So the spectrum is wide. You can run accelerator programs. You can do corporate VC. You can have entrepreneur programs. All these different tools, which kind of, I guess, good for different objectives. But what I see sometimes is corporates are launching these for innovation theater, for kind of fear of missing out. So how do you match these objectives with the tools, and what tools are best for certain objectives?
Yeah, super tricky. I mean, especially in the beginning, we saw that a lot of corporate accelerator programs have been launched, especially for theater and kind of an innovative positioning on the market, where there was not a lot behind, yeah. So, but also these corporates kind of had their learnings, I think, and they also realized that they kind of should not fuck up their positioning in the startup scene, because as soon as you communicate to the startup scene that you want to collaborate with them, there is definitely also an expectation from the startup side that there will be something happening. So all these programs which have been launched some 4 or 5 years ago for the sake of positioning a corporate as an innovative partner, but nothing behind. They kind of had a lot of struggles in the beginning as well. So for us, it's always like a matter of goals and objectives that you have. A lot of these programs are launched to really bring new products to the market. A lot of programs are launched to kind of get the company more innovative, get employees to new opportunities, give them insights into new technologies, and these objectives and goals have to be matched with the program that we kind of set up then in the end.
Gotcha. So Mo, what do you think? A lot of things is broken, a lot of things are not functioning, but what would make sense? Is it make sense, more sense for Series B companies to talk with corporates? What do you think? Yeah. What is the...
I mean, the engagement, so for example, a lot of my companies at seed stage, I tell them not to waste their time talking to big corporates. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Because they're still trying to search out their business model. And so I would say usually when I see success with quote-unquote startups, it's like a Series B company. So if people don't know what a Series B company is, it's a company that's been around typically for like 4 or 5 years. They've raised probably about anywhere between $30 to like $50 million. There's a lot more stability. The business model actually should be baked, isn't always the case, but should be baked by them. And they have enough people, resources, and money to be able to operate sort of like, to adapt to sort of support a corporate sort of like need. Seed stage, even Series A, really challenging. And I haven't seen really that many examples where that's actually been the case. But one thing, just to mention, I was trying to think of a company that actually seems to be doing, a big corporation that seems to be doing a good job in this area. Axel Springer. I would say they're probably one of the very few European big companies that have actually really sort of adopted and engaged well with startups. The mobile companies like T-Mobile, they suck. Telefonica, they suck. You go down a list, which is like most of the big banks, all terrible. Like it's so few. There's just so few of them.
Sure. So we talked about a lot of challenges, obstacles, and hurdles like legislation, procurement, also different measurements like innovation accounting versus tangible like ROIs and KPIs. Like, how do you overcome these challenges? Can you give us concrete examples? Like, how did you overcome these in your program, or maybe even you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on this before, but for a bank, financial resources is usually not the bottleneck. It's people resources. And I think that's what we've seen too. It's just not realistic for our bank to be pursuing 8 partnerships simultaneously with startups. So we set kind of reasonable expectations, I think, for ourselves and with the startups in the beginning. We try to have a streamlined process. We're trying to develop a fast track process where we can kind of bypass some of these traditional things like procurement. So for example, if it's below a certain threshold, then we're authorized to just move forward. And this email program that we're starting. So, what are other ways that the bank can actually tangibly work with startups and fintech innovations that doesn't involve a contract for a POC? Is there a lab that we can create where customers can come in and try out the products, and the bank representatives can be there. So we're trying to think creatively, I think, around some of that. And then, I just kind of wanted to touch also on the previous question about activities that corporates can do to kind of what I see, because I think BBVA is one bank that I would say is pretty successful, at least in terms of winning innovation awards and incorporating design thinking into what they're doing. And what I see as a typical journey is, corporate will start a program just because they don't want to be left out, or they want to be first movers. And I think that's what the case was with MKB. They knew that they are weak here and wanted this to exist. And I think eventually, we're getting deeper and deeper into the bank. So I think a lot of corporates will start with a training, they'll do some workshops, they'll start a program, they'll invest in a partner with somebody or invest in a co-working space. And then as they get, that's like step one, and they get more and more embedded, there becomes a need, I think, to build that capability inside if they actually want to get to the next level. And I think that's what's happening now at MKB. We're getting closer and closer into the business side of innovation, doing trainings and workshops and actually running customer journey experiences with the product development team. And it's really exciting. And I think, being kind of change managers in the bank is something that we're really excited about. And I think, we hope, or maybe I don't know if we hope this, but eventually I think that's the next step. They need to develop these. I think corporates will need to develop their own people, or spend money, either acqui-hire or bring in some of that expertise to really take full advantage of this mindset and all the things that can go with it. Because I think ultimately that's the only way that they can solve these problems.
Anton, what's your process when you start to work with a client of yours? How do you prepare them for a program? How do you discover their needs? How do you help them? How do you start to work with them?
Pretty much customized with every case, but generally speaking, I would say we start with like an internal analysis of what the corporate facilities offer, of what the corporate needs are, what their innovation goals are. Is there kind of an innovation strategy already in place? Do we need to set up one? So things that basically need to be the foundation to even start such an activity. If we have that, we pretty much look into business lines, what are their innovation needs and what are their use cases that they want to tackle. There are a lot of open cases in corporates where they don't have solutions for. So we want to identify these cases, and based on these cases, we look for startups in the startup space that offer such solutions, and then different kind of tools and formats go into place. Sometimes we use rapid prototyping sessions to kind of get things going. Sometimes it's more a design thinking approach to first map out what could be potential collaboration opportunities. So this is very, very different from corporate to corporate.
Absolutely. We are a little bit behind, but I think we have time for one question. I imagine there are a lot of people in the audience from large organizations who might not want to die in the next 5 years and want to seek opportunities to collaborate with startups and accelerate their innovation. So anybody has a question? No one. Well, in that case, do you have a question for the audience?
Anybody from Telenor or Telecom, or anybody wants to rebuttal to the...
Sorry about the note. But thank you so much for the panel. It was an interesting discussion, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.